From the Fathead Studio in Speedway, Indiana, this is The Skinny.
Man, am I still pretty? And he's like, you ain't pretty, but you're going to be all right.
And now I'm just hanging on, looking at the wall, like flying this way. And I'm like, oh man, I got to let go of this thing at some point.
And then there's one that could literally pick you up.
Yeah.
It's
I'm not really sure about that, but yeah.
That's called a helicopter.
Well,
And the last lap was just chaos. I mean, like 4 wide, 5 wide.
It's like whatever. If you land it and send it into the fence, you're probably not going to get hurt. Bounce and then this insane roll. The car that Keegan was in. I mean, I don't know, it's the shape of the Beetle or what, but that thing sent it.
So I was the supercharger specialist on my old man's car with
Specialist?
Yeah, it sounds cooler than crew guy.
Hi, I'm Tony Stewart.
I'm Mario Andretti.
I'm Christy Lee.
I'm Alexander Rossi.
I'm Cruz Pedregon.
I'm Stefan Johansson, and this is The Skinny.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to The Skinny. This is the Fatheads Eyewear Studio. I'm Ken Stout. The big man sitting alongside is Rico Elmore. He put this beautiful place together, and then the guy running all the controls, making us look, well, as good as we can possibly look. That is Michael Young. We call him the track dude. We have a very special guest here that is going to join us today. For 30 years, competed at the top of the game, spent 12 years inside of F1. 11 years inside of F1, 12 podiums along the way, 10 different teams, raced with some of the absolute best. Ayrton Senna, some guy by the name of Alain Prost, I think a 4-time champ, maybe 50-plus Grand Prix wins. It's a pretty big name. But Stefan Johansson, we welcome you here to the show. You've been a team owner, you've been a race car driver, you've been a driver manager, you've been a driver coach, you're currently an artist. Man, oh man, you've had quite a career. Looking back, are you astonished?
Well, not really, because you don't think about it in that way. You know, I just sort of I've been lucky enough to do what I love doing my whole life, pretty much. You know, I had a real job for about 6 months when I was 18, but then...
How'd that feel?
You're like,
that didn't go so well.
That wasn't any good.
So I went off to England and tried to become a racing driver, you know, professionally, and sort of somehow it worked out.
So you've had some of our friends, some of our guests actually, that have been on the show that as I was doing some homework on you, I was like, well, I got to reach out to a couple of these guys. One of them by the name of Tim Keene. Another one by the name of Scott Dixon. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with him.
Yeah.
Dixon said, ask him about this time when the crew and I got together in a F-150. And they crashed the truck.
Yeah, I still haven't got the truth of what happened with that. But all I know, when I had my team, my Indy Lights team, down here in Gasoline Alley, Scott was, came, just a little kid from New Zealand, 17 years old, and he brought his posse with him, Blair and everybody, and Anton and the whole gang, and I don't know what they were doing, but I still haven't got the full answer. But anyway, the 150 ended up upside down in the river, over the bridge there as you come over, Gasoline Alley.
Right.
Yeah. Well, they got it back to the shop, and I think they were trying to sneak it back to the shop, and somehow no one would notice. But I mean, there wasn't one straight panel left on the car. So.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Upside down on the river's a good one.
I suspect Scott was probably the driver, and
Come on now.
Yeah. But hey.
So as I took a look at your career. Great success all the way along the way. I am curious, Macau, you qualified on the pole, F3 there, and you won the first race, and you did not win the second race, but you finished second. And then
clutch broke on the second race.
Is that what happened?
Yeah.
And the guy that you were racing against did finish first, and he won the overall. Was it based on final position in the second race?
Yeah.
Because the points would have been the same, effectively.
Yeah, well, I can't actually remember exactly. Yeah, the second race is the one that really counts, yeah. So...
and you were right there.
Yeah, I started on pole for the second race, then clutch broke right, so I went off the line, so, stumbled a bit, and then that was enough to lose the position, and it's tough to pass there.
And it's races like that was that an important part of opening up the door for you to continue up into to F1? How did that happen? You didn't start off in F1.
I was already in F1 actually, because I did this just as a one-off. I mean, I raced in F3 in 1980 and won the British Championship with Ron Dennis, actually before he bought McLaren, when it was called Project 4. And then I sort of did F2 and then the F1. So 84, I was already established in F1, kind of. Drove for Tolman with Ayrton, was my teammate the last 5 races. And then Eddie Jordan came to me and said, do you fancy doing Macau, the F3 race? Because it was the end of the year, season was over. I said, well, why not? Let's do it. And so we did. So I hadn't driven an F3 car for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
Effectively, since when I got there. But it was Teddy Yip, who was like the main team out there. But it was Eddie Jordan who actually ran the car.
So when you started your career off, it was a bit tumultuous, really. I mean, you went through a number of teams there, going back to 1980 to 83, kind of getting going. You kept picking your way, bobbing and weaving to different teams, just trying to make a way.
Yeah, it was a lot of start and stops, along the way for sure, especially in the early years. I jumped in whenever there was a seat open. I just jumped on any opportunity I could, really, to get a foot in the door. And it did work out eventually. I did, actually it was with Tolman in 84. I think when I got my real break, when the last race in Portugal, I was fighting with Nicky Lauda for 4th place the whole race. And Nicky had to he had to pass me to get within 1 point of Prost. And he wanted with 1 point. And I ended up getting a slow puncture, so I had to pit. And I think Enzo Ferrari was watching the race, and he was like, who's that? And then I got a phone call, come to the factory, in Italy. We just want to say hello and get to know each other and everything. So this was at the end of 84. And I had already a contract with Tolman for 85. And then when Arnoux, I don't know if you remember that, René Arnoux got fired after the first race in Brazil. And I got the call from Enzo to come down. Actually, I met Marco Piccinini at the Savoy in London, because I lived in London at the time, and he was there, and it all happened in 2-3 days. The whole deal, Tolman let me go, and that was it. It's just, being at the right place at the right time for once. You couldn't lift, because if you lift and the thing would grab, it'll just shoot you straight into the wall. Because you just got to keep your foot planted, and just keep pumping the gears in.
The Skinny is brought to you by Fatheads Eyewear. Fatheads Eyewear, hardcore since '04. And American Coach, innovation is our life force.
Welcome back to The Skinny. We're having a great time here. One of the best of all time has joined us inside of the studio. Stefan Johansson is with us. Of course, so successful in Formula One, eventually into kart. Did run the 500 a number of times as well. And we're just getting started here to find out the path of his career. And it was in the early 80s when he was making his debut in Formula One and was able to join in 84 with Tolman, Ayrton Senna, your teammate at the time. And we were just talking while we were at commercial break, and I asked what type of car that was that you were in.
So it was a Tolman F1 car. They built their own car like you have to do in F1, so everybody had their own chassis. This particular car was really a fantastic car, but it was kind of a small team, so no one, I don't think, really appreciated how good the car was. It was designed by Rory Byrne, who eventually ended up designing the championship-winning Benettons when Schumacher was there. Then Schumacher took him with him to Ferrari, and he was really the chief designer of all the Ferraris.
Wow.
When Michael won everything there. I mean, Ross Brawn was the technical director, but it was Rory who did the design, and he's like in his 80s now. He lives in Thailand, but he still is involved in the design of the Ferraris.
Well, pretty cool.
Amazing guy. One of the most underrated, if not I would say the most underrated designer in Formula One history, I would say.
Just before the break, we talked about you getting the call from Ferrari. So, Rico, you were talking about it before, and we've all watched that movie, Ford versus Ferrari, and saw a little bit how they depicted it in Hollywood, if you will. But what was it like working with an Enzo Ferrari? Was there much contact between you and the owner?
Absolutely, yeah. We back then, there was no simulators or any of that. So, we did almost every day. We tested in between races at the test track at Fiorano. Most of the time, it was just pounding round and round and round with no real purpose, it felt like. But But, at least, I would say 3 days a week when we didn't have races, we were testing. And every day we had lunch with Enzo in his house by the track, and
wow.
he used the whole court, and we used to laugh and joke. Now when you reflect, you didn't think so much about it then because it was just part of what you did. But thinking back now, it was pretty amazing, to have that connection, and he was a wonderful man. He really was.
Give us an idea what it was like to drive those cars. I mean, some of the stories that we've heard, the way you describe them, they say stand alone. I mean, talking to Scott Dixon, Tim Keene, as I was asking those guys, give me a little something on him, they're like, just listen to the stories he has about what it took to drive those cars. So give us a feel, man. Take us for a ride.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think throughout history of motor racing, those were probably the most crazy cars there ever was and will be, most likely. Because there was the cars were so raw, there was no driver aids, it was just, 500 kilo car, first of all, which is almost half the weight of the current F1 cars, with 15, sometimes, I think we had more than 1,600 horsepower qualifying for Monza in 85. It was insane. I mean, it was like, literally like a grenade, so you had to completely change your driving style, because you couldn't just kind of enter a corner and flow. You had to give yourself hug the inside of the apex as long as you could and floor it and just anticipate for the power. When the turbo kicked in, it was like a light switch, there was no modulating the throttle or anything. It was just like an explosion, and you needed as much room as you could get on the exit just to pick the gears, because you literally, you just pumping the gears in, one after the other. Even at Monza, which is one of the fastest tracks, in the world, very long gears. We had wheel spin going from fourth to, we only had 5 gears then, fourth to fifth, with qualifying tires, 1 lap qualis. It was mental. And the engine was just, it was just 1 lap. You had to get it done in 1 lap, 1 lap qualis.
1 lap.
Yeah, and then, but there was nothing left of the engine. It was just oil pouring out of every orifice, take it out, put a new one in the next day, and that's how it was, 1.5 liters.
I think that's something the young people today do not realize. Because with the engine management, they can control the power is so smooth. They go to power and it's all good. But for you guys,
well, it was hardly any electronics back then either. Right. It was none of that.
And I was watching something. With Senna was running, and the shifter is right down here, and he's pounding the gears.
Yeah.
And somebody said that was 1990. I said, no way, that's got to be like the 80s. Oh, it was 1990.
Yeah.
And
90, they just started bringing in the sequential then, so that made it a little bit easier in crossfit,
Right.
But
I think it was.
In Monaco was insane. Qualifying there, because very short gears.
One hand
going
on
up
the
that
wheel.
hill, it was just wheel spinning every gear, and you couldn't lift, because if you lift and the thing would grab, it'll just shoot you straight into the wall. Because you just got to keep your foot planted, and just keep pumping the gears in, until you get to the top of the hill, and then jump on the brakes. It's annoying, and it does hurt, and there's 40 years ago now, and I still have days where like,
Welcome back to the Fatheads Eyewear Studio. We're here in Speedway, Indiana. This is The Skinny. I'm Ken Stout, Rico Elmore, the track dude back there behind the controls, and Stefan Johansson is with us here in the studio, fresh out of Santa Monica, California, has come in here for the Grand Prix this weekend. We'll also see him again at the 500, which he competed at himself for a number of years. I want to go back to, if my info is correct here, I believe it was your second race at Ferrari, or with Ferrari, I should say. And you pass Senna for the lead with 2 laps to go as he's running out of fuel, only to find out that a half lap later, you also ran out of fuel.
I know. It was, and he shouldn't have, because if I ever drove a perfect race, that was the one, because the car was fast, it was really fast in free practice. Then in qualifying on the Saturday, the guys forgot to tighten the floor. So the whole underbody was moving, so the car was all over the place. I qualified think 15th or something, way down. And then in the warm-up on Sunday, the car was really fast again. So I knew the car was quick enough to win the race. And we had, back then the fuel was really critical. So we had the number we had to meet all the time. And I was exactly on the number the whole race. They kept hanging out, more boost, so I'm good. I know exactly, I knew that I had enough to take the lead at the end, which I did, and then finding out a lap later. But so what happened was there was a little crack in the inlet manifold, which was sucking in air. So then for the mixture, the engine compensated. So whatever more air came in, it was putting more fuel in to get the same mixture.
So the number you were hitting was doing no good at all.
Yeah, the numbers were correct the whole time, and then but just one of those things, But. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. Yeah.
Crazy. It's crazy how it goes. And and as I read about your career, to see what all you accomplished, unfortunately never stood on top of the box. But I want to say you actually held the record, or at least tied the record, if I'm not mistaken, for a number of podiums without a win.
Yeah.
I mean, still very successful, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's second is better than third, but I mean, it still hurts that I didn't manage to get to the top of the podium. Of course, I can't deny that. That's what we're all there for. I mean, that's you go racing to win, right? Not to finish second. So of course, it's annoying and it does hurt. And there's 40 years ago now, and I still have days where like, yeah, because I mean I think just the mentality of every successful driver. You have that burning desire. That's what you're there for. 4 years later, I find out that he had the team take the engine out of my car and put it in his car.
Once again, welcome back to the Skinny. We have Stefan Johansson in the studio with us, and as we document a little bit of his Formula One career, in 1986, there were some pretty big names that really thought that you should be the lead driver on that team. Michaela Alvarado, I believe, was your teammate at the time, but people like Murray Walker, James Hunt were like, man, he's really good. He should really be the primary driver. And then going into 87, that ride with Ferrari ended, but you ended up with at the time, two-time championship-winning driver and the reigning championship team of McLaren from the previous year. You had to be excited. Were you excited? I should ask. I mean, to go from Ferrari, leaving Ferrari has to be disappointing, but to go to McLaren at that time had to be pretty exciting.
Oh, of course. I mean, that was, there was an opportunity. They won the championship the year before, and they were really the standard back then. They were the first team that really started exploring aerodynamics in a meaningful way with wind tunnels and so on. And the Ferrari, especially the 86 Ferrari, was not a particularly good car. The 85 car was strong, but the 86 car we had a lot of problems, both handling wise, but also with the engine and so on. And there was a lot of politics and so on. So I felt this opportunity was a much better chance for me to, I knew I was up against it with Alain, of course, being the current champion and everything, but I still felt that, it was a better option for me at the time. So
exciting as a driver to be next to the pinnacle at the time, to find out exactly where you stood.
Yeah, of course. And also, I knew, McLaren, I drove for Ron in Formula 3. Before he bought McLaren, when he had Project 4, I won the British F3 championship with Ron, so we knew each other very well before. And I knew all the guys in the team quite well, the engineers and so on, because when I did F3, I lived in Woking, where the team was, and all the guys lived there. So we actually socially met quite often, so there was a lot of good friends there, so it was a kind of more like coming home almost in a way, to go to McLaren. And of course, then being, in the championship winning team and the best driver at the time in the world, so it was, I felt this is a much better opportunity.
I always thought it was interesting with Alain, him and Senna just absolutely at each other's throats nonstop. Yeah. Ayrton untimely early death, passes away, and who is in charge of his foundation? Alon. That's who.
Yeah.
Him and his
no,
sister.
I mean, I don't think it would have been at the time, but time heal all wounds. I mean, but I mean, they were both insanely competitive, and having been teammates with both of them, obviously, I got to understand their character quite well. But with Alain, I have to say, I mean, it was, in my opinion, he was, as a complete package, the best driver in that period, without a doubt. His ability to manage the whole weekend, to manage the car, the team. I mean, I learned more in 1 year with him than I did in my whole career. He was amazing. I mean, he really was. He totally raised the level. I mean, even when Ayrton came there, he was by far, let's say on a lap, the best driver, no question. And he may arguably be, even to this day, but he still didn't have the complete package. I don't think he had the full understanding of setting the car up in the way. I mean, Alain was, because, his computer started to creep in just around then, but it was so basic, compared to what it is today, for example. I mean, now they barely ask the driver what the car's doing anymore because they can see it before you even tell them. But back then, the driver input was hugely important, and I remember the first 2 or 3 races with Alain. I mean, my brain was just fried after the debriefs, because it was like, brrr, it was just every little detail, But then I started to understand. So you had it all in compartments, and it was all broken down into sections, and so it's something I carried with me the rest of my career, And
so I'm really curious what it's like behind closed doors when you were with Ferrari and you have Senna as a teammate, you're with McLaren, and you have Prost as a teammate. Is there a lot of sharing? You drove for Chip. I know how Chip thinks. Man, we're one team, and I don't care how many cars are out here. Everybody's going to talk to everybody and help everybody. Mm-hmm. Was it that way in Formula One? Did the drivers communicate like that? Because it seems like it's a lot more selfish, if you will.
Yeah, it is. No question about it. It's. I mean, I think in any team, it's the first objective is to beat your teammate, of course, but it's not as important here because everybody's in the same car, first of all. So, that like in F1, everybody has a different car. So the only real yardstick you have is your teammate. So it's vital you at least beat your teammate, before you start making any excuses about the car's not good enough.
Car's not right. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So and that's what, like in '86, for example, that was my only goal because I knew the car wasn't good enough to win. So my only goal was to beat Michael in the championship, which I did, so, and you had to then plan the season accordingly. You have to think about all in a completely different way than if you were trying to win every race because, we weren't able to, on speed, maybe on crazy circumstances, but not on sheer speed. We would never be able to do that, with that car.
Yeah, I've often wondered how that went down over there because it definitely seems they're much more aggressive. We have to take care of yourself there. You're out, right?
I got one. So my third, it's the last race in Portugal with Tolman when Ayrton was my teammate. So I out-qualified him on the Friday. And, of course, in his mind, that was inconceivable that I could be faster than he was, So, and I didn't find this, like 4 years later, I find out that he'd had the team take the engine out of my car and put it in his car.
Really?
Yeah, because it was absolutely inconceivable that I could be faster. So it had to be the engine, So, and it was like one of my old mechanics who then.
That sounds like a Tommy Byrne story right there.
Wow. Well, we were under strict orders not to tell you, but Ayrton took your engine.
Oh my goodness!
For the second day.
Wow. Yeah. That's and that's the stuff that goes on over there that I don't think it goes on here. At least not that I'm aware of anyway.
No, I doubt it. I mean, he may, but I've never heard of anything like that here, no.
Well, as you might imagine, he had some close calls along the way when you race at that level and those speeds for as long as he raced. And we're going to touch on that when we come back.
Way too much time to think about it before you hit anything. So I'm like, I'm pulling my legs, so I'm ripping the wheel out of the car,
The Skinny is brought to you by American Coach. American Coach, innovation is our life force. And Fatheads Eyewear. Fatheads Eyewear, hardcore since '04.
Welcome back to the Skinny. We're in Speedway, Indiana. Stefan Johansson has joined us in the studio here, we are picking our way through his F1 career. And in 1987, you're at the Australian Grand Prix and had quite a close call, which you would think Australian Grand Prix, maybe it was with a kangaroo, but it was with a deer.
That was in Austria.
Austria,
okay. Yeah. It was. That was a gnarly accident. I mean, Austria back then in particular was ultra. I mean, it was like an oval almost.
Oh, okay.
Long, really long, fast sweeping corners. And you come over this brow. This was first practice on Friday morning, I think it was. And you can't see anything. It's blind. You go over the brow. You just pick top gear. So you're doing about 330 clicks probably, kilometers. And you only sort of, you have this marshal's pose. As soon as you see the roof of the marshal's pose, you turn. Because then you know you're going to be, kind of goes light and then it lands and you're kind of pointing in the right direction. And
back to that 1,600 horsepower.
Come over the brow, car's light, there's a deer standing right there. I mean, my signal didn't even go from my brain to my foot to hit the brakes. I mean, it just went puff. Luckily, it hit the left side, not in the middle, because if it hit the middle of the car, it would have taken my head off for sure, But it literally ripped the whole left front suspension out of like 4 gaping holes like that in the tub. Oh. Just ripped the whole lot out. Took the side pod, the rear wheel, and Ayrton was behind me. So it was like there wasn't a piece bigger than this left of the. I mean, it all ended up in his car. And I mean, literally inside the car, the radiator inlets, everything. But so the runoff there is like probably 200 meters with wet grass in the morning. So the car didn't slow down, I think half a kilometer even. And it's not, I mean, here at Indy, if something goes wrong, it's just boom, boom, poof, it's over. You hit the wall. But there, it's like you have way too much time to think about it before you hit anything. So I'm like, I'm pulling my legs, so I'm ripping the wheel out of the car, trying to like, just waiting for it to hit, And then luckily it sort of spun around and backed into the wall, so it didn't hit front first. But I broke 3 ribs. But it was probably the scariest accident I've ever had, actually.
So talk to me about the German Grand Prix, because you famously finished that one on 3 wheels.
Yeah. Yeah, same thing. Well, a few cars had the same problem, I guess. The front just delaminated all of a sudden. Luckily mine didn't do it till the last lap. So, I think one lap before the end. So I did 1 lap. It sort of blew up right as I came for first corner. But it wasn't that big of a deal, to be honest. I had to slow down a lot, obviously. But I was just 3-wheeling it back. It took half the lap for all the delamination to disappear eventually. Then it became a little bit easier after that, but yeah.
When you think back at that car, and you're around these cars today, when you look inside of the cockpits now and you see the level of safety that they have in comparison to where you were, what goes through your mind?
Well, it's the weird thing is, back then we thought, thank God we didn't drive the cars a decade ago.
In the 60s, right?
They were dangerous. Yeah, but when you look back now, you see the head just bobbing out there with no protection whatsoever. It's a miracle nothing more happened, really.
It's what I was talking about earlier.
Like if you had a side impact, you had 0 protection.
The low cut.
No, the low cockpit, exactly. Yeah.
It's very impressive, no question about it. And you take a look at those cars. You mentioned it before. To me, whenever I see one, just the sheer size of it.
This is what blows my mind.
They are big cars.
Massive.
You wonder how they make that turn at Monaco. How do they get around it?
Like a movie or something. It's enormous, the size of it.
Transformers.
Yeah.
Like some wild
thing. But again, this is a strange thing with F1 in particular. They write the rules, whatever, but they always miss something. And like in IndyCar and NASCAR, if anyone comes up with something clever that is clearly an advantage, they shut it down immediately before anyone even have time to think about carrying down that road, let's say, and everybody follows, In F1, they well, you know, that someone's done a clever interpretation of the rules, so then, and it kind of carries on. So the only way, I mean, I don't know, I mean, the wheelbase is 1 meter longer than it used to be. That's, I mean, it looks like a bus.
Oh, they're long. Yeah.
But of course, the more surface you have, the more aero. I mean, and you know, aero is everything. That's the only thing they care about in F1. It's aerodynamics, you know. So if you have 1 more meter of surface to play with, of course, that's a huge advantage in aerodynamically.
Yeah, like I say, I mean, I watch them run at Monaco, and I every single time I wonder if they're going to make that left-hander. I mean, can you even get the car around? You know, waiting for somebody to back it in like a sprint car.
It's crazy.
Want to get the skinny on other guests and different types of motorsports? Check out our YouTube page and get the skinny.
Stefan Johansson in the studio with us for many, many years, competed in Formula One, did a fabulous job, 10 different teams somewhere along the way as he bobbed and weaved throughout some of the absolute best, and of course recorded 12 podiums along the way. Also a winner at the 12 Hours of Sebring, also a winner, and help me out here, I actually saw that you won Le Mans 3 times in class, I want to say. And did you win it overall one time?
Yeah, 97, yeah.
Yeah, amazing run there in sports cars.
Yeah. I mean, that's, you know, I ended up doing sports cars once I stopped the single-seater career. And I did some before as well, sort of in between. I always loved sports car racing. Yeah.
In a stint, you finally got together with Chip and drove the Lexus Riley.
Yeah.
So talk to me about some of the sports car stuff. In 2005, you ran a full season there with Chip and the DP car.
Yep. With the Kurt Wagner was my teammate.
Yeah. Tim Keane told me to ask you. He said, "How's Kurt Wagner doing?"
I'm sure he's doing fine. Yeah. It was fun. I mean, I loved. You know, it's good hard racing, especially that DPI, you know, the cars were quite similar, you know, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the year. Enjoyed driving for Chip, you know. I mean, it's a world-class operation, always has been, you know, and it's always great to work with real professionals, you know. It makes the driver's life a lot easier, that's for sure.
Along the way, when you were stepping out of the car, you started an Indy Lights team. You touched on Scott Dixon, Jeff Ward, who worked his way up into IndyCar and I believe was successful in grabbing a win up there as well. Mm-hmm. You also ran the Indianapolis 500 a couple of times. Walk us through what was that? What was it like being at the Speedway?
I loved it. It was, for me, qualifying at Indy is the ultimate in motor racing. There's nothing that beats, you know, the race itself is fantastic too, but qualifying is really, that's the real deal. I mean,
so for you as a driver, that's what sticks in your brain, was that pressure.
Yeah. It separates the boys from the men, that's for sure, you know. It's the whole, everything about this race is phenomenal, really, and it is what makes it, in my opinion, the individual best race in the world, no question. You know, the facility, the history, just the whole element of, you know, just what it takes out of you to get it done, you know, is really, it's never easy. I mean, if you want to, I mean, it's easy maybe if you can, you know, if you don't have any ambitions, but if you want to run up front, you know, it's definitely not easy.
You know, it's interesting. We had a couple of other Swedes on the show, and Marcus Ericsson's exact comment was, coming out of 4 down the front stretch, it feels like you were driving on a one-lane road. Mm-hmm. He said it just closes in.
Well, I'll never forget when we did the rookie orientation, the first, you go out of the pit, you come around and come out of 4, and you see one, and everybody keeps telling me, you know, like they do with everybody, because, you know, you got to be flat to go quick around here. You know, I'm like, there is no way in my lifetime I'm going to go flat through that corner. But of course, you build up to it, you know, and you get the car comfortable in the beginning, then you kind of, you know, lighten it up as you go along, you know, and then, you know, to get to the point where it's okay, but it definitely takes out, you know, a lot out of you for sure.
I've said it on this show a couple of times. The first time I was ever at the Speedway. It was carb day, and I sat down in turn 1, and I watched this car coming at me down the front straightaway, and I literally, talking to myself at this point, said, there's no way on God's green earth that car is going to make this turn. There's
I
not
don't think
gonna
it's a
happen.
good idea for a driver to watch turn 1 from the, certainly not from the outside.
Right.
You know.
In the stands.
No. Yeah.
It's unbelievable. And you have like Dario Franchitti tweeted last year, I was scared to death every time I went into turn 1.
Yeah.
I mean, 3-time winner
But
of the
Dixon
race.
said something similar.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think when you're on the limit, I mean, if you don't have that feeling, it's probably not quick, you know, then you can probably go a little bit quicker again, I feel like, you know. It's the car, when you're really trimmed out, I mean, it's so light, you know, it's just, yeah.
Beautiful stuff for sure. Well, what do you do when you decide to quit driving race cars, but you still need to make a living? We'll talk about that because Stefan's really good at what he does.
Just take everything out. Just trim it as much as you possibly can. No. It's okay, you know, we come back and just do it. Because you're in the twilight zone at that point.
The Skinny is brought to you by Fatheads Eyewear. Fatheads Eyewear, hardcore since '04. And American Coach. American Coach, innovation is our life force.
Welcome back to Speedway, Indiana. We're just down the street from that magical place known as Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Stefan Johansson is in the studio with us here today, and we've been talking about the Indianapolis 500. He did partake in that over the course of a couple of years in his career as well. And Michael, you just brought up a quick question there, and of course, Stefan, you mentioned qualifying. You know, qualifying back in 2003?
2003 was for me it was 93 the first time.
93.
Yeah.
93.
Yeah.
So it was a good bit different than what it is now.
Well, yeah, and what had happened, they'd filled the field differently. So, like in 97, when Lyondike broke the record, he was in the middle of the field. Even though he qualified the second day. Everybody got an attempt, and you got 3 attempts in a car. Well, it was completely different. You talked about the insanity of qualifying. What was it like having to think, I might have to go back out again after hanging it out?
Yeah, so the first year I did was 93. I actually qualified on the second row. You know, next to I think Nigel and whoever. So I had a great first year. That was no problem. But 95, I was with Tony Bettenhouse, and you know, my whole career in IndyCar, and we were with the Penske, of course. And that year, if you remember, was the year both Al and Emerson got knocked out. And as it were, I ended up knocking Emerson out in the literally last minute. But I had 9 attempts during the month. So first week, we tried with both the race car and the spare car. Wasn't quick enough. So then we ended up, you know, both Penske, we were scrambling trying to find cars, you know. So I think Penske ended up with a Lola from Ray Hall and a Reynard from somewhere else. You know, we ended up renting Hiro Matsushita's show car, which was a year-old Reynard. And Ford found an engine, so we bolted this engine in the back of that and prepped it. You know, we only got out like on bubble day, like at, you know, maybe noon or something, and did like an opening run. And the car was quick right away. You know, the car was pretty good actually. I think we did a 226 or something right away. And then qualifying started. You know, of course everybody's waiting until the afternoon when the temperature's cooling down. So I went out, did the first run, and the pop-off valve blew. So that was attempt 1. Then we waited a little bit, went out again, and now it was like, I don't know, 5:30 or something. It was like because now this was going to be the run. And the car just wasn't quick enough. It was just draggy as hell, you know. So then everybody just kind of, you know, pulled in. Everybody's through the towel. Oh, well, that's it. Sorry, guys. You know, sorry, Tony got on the radio. So, you know, not your fault, sir, we didn't make it. So I just drove past everybody straight down to the scrutineering line again, trying to get in line to have another go. And then Bernie Marcus, who was my engineer, you know, and Tony said, well, you know, just take everything out. Just trim it as much as you possibly can. No. It's okay, you know, we come back and just do it. Because you're in the twilight zone at that point. You don't care. I mean, the only thing is to make it.
Make
you
that
know?
race.
Yeah. So anyway, so they all, you know, so they trimmed it out. Of course, like you said, like Scott said, you have I mean, I had literally no idea what the car was going to do. You go out for the run, and as I left the pits, the gun went off. So it was absolute last run of the day. And I remember going down, on the first lap, I put my left foot over the right foot to make sure there was going to be no
Just
lift.
hold her down.
It is not going to be my fault if
and
we don't
just
qualify.
screaming, turning into one, and of course it stuck, So then the car was actually really well balanced, and ultra fast. So I did the 4 laps really quick and ended up getting in the race, but that's what I'm talking about. The pressure is just, and I actually totally broke down on the in lap. Then I guess it just sort of sank in, and I was for a week, till like Thursday the next week, I was a total basket case.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty intense.
As I say, indescribable when you're out there on that day.
Yeah, you can't. It is so. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it, but it's just there's nothing like it.
There is nothing like it.
No.
So man.
So doing something maybe a little safer in painting now.
So
yes,
Rico
exactly.
brings it up,
Yeah.
and I've teased it for a couple of segments here. I want to talk about your artwork because it is absolutely stunning. It's fabulous. For starters, where can people go to find your art for sale?
On my website is the easiest, just stefanjohansson.com. Pretty much everything that's for sale is up there for sure, yeah.
I read a quick story, and it was many, many years ago, but you had always enjoyed being an artist, but was it a friend of yours that passed away that motivated you to put the brush to canvas?
It was Elio De Angelis, who was driving Ayrton's teammate at the time at Lotus. So Ayrton and I were like brothers. I mean, we were really, really close friends, traveled together, always hung out, between races and stuff. And I remember, we were sitting on the pit lane in Paul Ricard, just bullshitting like you do on a test day, and then he went out, and then I went out like a minute or two later on, and I could see this big cloud of smoke, coming past the pits, came around the corner, and then, his car was upside down at the side of the track. So I stopped, then Alain arrived, and then Jacques Lafitte, and I think we were there. He was on fire. We were trying to help him get out of the car, couldn't. I mean, it was just like unbelievably traumatic experience, and for whatever reason, I was always interested in art before. I mean, I used to buy a few paintings here and there when I started making money, but that prompted me to somehow go and buy some canvas, some paint, and try to do something in his memory, and then I realized this is something, I really love doing, and I've been doing it ever since, really. But more just for myself, really, never with the intent of selling. It was just something I did as therapy or like a hobby, whatever. But then when I finally quit driving myself like 7-8 years ago, then I just poured all the energy into that like I did in racing before when I was driving, so. Yeah,
and so
that's
for
where
the
we are
fans
now.
at home, if you take a look at his hat, it's a good indication of what you'll see when you go onto the website. But picture an IndyCar coming out of the middle of that hat, and it would be something similar. I mean, you have to go in and take a look at it.
That's
but
what I'm trying to project actually with this, is kind of the impression of speed and the intensity of the moment, if you like. Yeah, it's
a very unique look, eclectic maybe. It's stunning is
Thank
what
you.
it is, really.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
there's
I
a number
appreciate
of different pieces that you do have available.
Yeah.
You just came out with one of Scott Dixon going through one of the turns at the Speedway, and I'm absolutely fascinated with it. But it's beautiful, beautiful stuff.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you. It's tough, but having done racing my whole life, you sort of know how to deal with it. But being an artist, it's pretty daunting. You labor. You have an idea in your head. You labor it. Something eventually ends up there, and now you're like, are they going to like this or not?
Am I really done with this? I think I'm done.
Yeah.
Do you do that? Do you finish and then you go to sleep and you wake up the next day and you're like, I don't know, maybe a little more?
Yeah, exactly. So I can imagine like musicians, it must be comedians in particular, I'm sure, must be really tough.
Man, we want to say thank you for taking the time. It was cool to see the artwork and reach out to you. Appreciate you getting back to us, and then of course getting off the plane and coming right in the studio. Thanks for taking the time.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, good stuff. Enjoy the month of May here in Indianapolis. I know you will, and your friends out there as well at the Speedway. Sure. So, ladies and gentlemen, Stefan Johansson in the studio with us here today, and now you have a little bit of the skinny on this guy's rich career.